The neighborhood had always been quiet, pristine, and meticulously controlled by the HOA, where every lawn blade and mailbox angle was scrutinized. Moving in was supposed to be simple, a new beginning for my wife and me after years of deployment, travel, and city life. We thought the boxes, the hum of the moving truck, and the fresh scent of paint would blend seamlessly into suburban calm. That illusion didn't last 5 minutes. HOA Karen appeared almost immediately, her heels clicking with practiced authority. Her eyes narrowed at the truck, her gaze fixed on my wife stepping out, uniform crisp and hair perfectly in place. She didn't wait for introductions. She dialed 911 before a single neighbor could even wave hello, speaking rapidly, painting a picture of a supposed imposter soldier claiming our home as hers. Her words tumbled out like she was reporting a crime rather than welcoming new neighbors. We watched as her face twisted with a mix of indignation and self-importance, convinced she was the guardian of the community. The air between us grew tense, neighbors peeking out, whispering, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding. Morgan, calm and steady, continued her unpacking as if nothing was happening, moving with quiet confidence, while Karen fumed louder, telling everyone around that this was a threat. By the time police lights reflected off the street, the atmosphere had changed. Something in the air suggested that this confrontation would not end the way HOA Karen had imagined. Next chapter begins with the arrival of law enforcement and the first shocking reaction. If you're ready, I can continue with chapter 2 next. Do you want me to proceed? The flashing red and blue lights cast long shadows across the freshly paved street as the police cruiser rolled to a stop. HOA Karen practically vibrated with excitement, certain that she had summoned reinforcements against a criminal. Neighbors gathered on their porches, phones out, their curiosity rivaling their concern. The officers stepped out, professional and composed, scanning the scene before their gaze landed on my wife. Morgan moved slowly, deliberately, carrying herself with a calm authority that seemed to fill the space around her. She reached into her bag and retrieved her military ID, the badge gleaming faintly in the afternoon sun. Karen's eyes widened instantly, a flicker of uncertainty flashing across her face. She paused mid-sentence, forgetting even to speak. The officers, trained to respond to any threat, asked for ID verification. Morgan extended her credentials, letting the sunlight catch the polished metal, casting a faint glint that momentarily blinded the front row of spectators. The silence that followed was absolute. One officer's hand instinctively went to his chest in a salute. Another nodded sharply. Murmurs ran through the crowd, the neighbors' collective shock palpable. HOA Karen's confidence drained instantly. Her poised indignation crumbled, replaced by disbelief. She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came. The weight of authority, respect, and truth hung in the air like an invisible gavel. The first chapter of her humiliation had begun, and the street would never see her the same way again. Next chapter begins with HOA Karen facing the consequences and public embarrassment. Karen's cheeks flushed a deep red as the officers completed their check, confirming Morgan's rank, deployments, and commendations. The weight of official recognition pressed down on her like a physical force, leaving her frozen at the curb. The neighborhood, once intimidated by her loud commands and arbitrary fines, watched in stunned silence as the supposed threat transformed into undeniable authority. Every murmur, every sideways glance seemed to underline her irrelevance. Morgan remained calm, returning to unpacking boxes with deliberate patience, her presence alone commanding respect. The officers explained that there had been no legal grounds for Karen's claims, that her harassment of the new residents could lead to fines against her, and that HOA rules could not override federal or military authority. As they handed her the paperwork, a few neighbors whispered, taking mental notes for future reference. The humiliation was immediate and public. Karen's usual certainty evaporated, replaced by flustered stammering and wild hand gestures. The street, which once adhered silently to her petty rules, now held a collective amusement at her expense. Children peeked through curtains, neighbors whispered behind hands, and the police left with quiet acknowledgement of the disruption she had caused. For the first time, HOA Karen realized that her carefully constructed power had limits. The scales had shifted, and the first domino of her downfall had fallen. Next chapter begins with final repercussions and a lasting legacy of the confrontation. Days passed, and the reverberations of that afternoon continued to ripple through the neighborhood. HOA fines that had been issued in arrogance were reversed. Notices that had threatened consequences were voided. Morgan's calm demeanor and undeniable credentials had shifted the balance of authority, leaving Karen struggling to rebuild credibility that had evaporated in sunlight. Neighbors, emboldened by the display, began questioning petty enforcement, challenging unnecessary restrictions, and supporting the newcomers with quiet but firm solidarity. Karen's attempts to reassert dominance were met with polite refusal, awkward glances, and the occasional smirk. The once feared figure had become a cautionary tale, whispered about over fences and at neighborhood gatherings. Morgan's return to civilian life was marked not only by the homecoming she deserved, but also by a subtle reshaping of the community's rules, including an unspoken acknowledgement of respect for military service and personal dignity. In the end, what had begun as a petty power struggle ended as a lesson in humility, respect, and the consequences of underestimating someone who had faced real battles. Karen had frozen the moment truth was revealed, and that frozen image became symbolic. A neighborhood once ruled by fear had learned the value of integrity and restraint. Morgan's military ID had not only commanded respect but had quietly rewritten the rules of engagement for anyone who would try to intimidate others. The street, once her stage, now reflected her downfall. Silence, honor, and a subtle smile replaced her bluster, and the neighborhood learned that true authority demands both courage and restraint.